Python supports the typical logical conditions in mathematics. So we have an equality, not equal to, less than or equal to, greater than, and greater than or equal to. Now these conditions can be used in several ways, and the most common ones are if statements and loops. So let's take an example. So let this be our if condition. And very simple, we say that A is equal to 66 and B is equal to 500. If B is less than A, then I want to print that B is, or rather let's check for B is greater than A. So we want to print B is greater than A. And when you run this, you get the result B is greater than A. In this example, we used two variables A and B. And these two variables are used as a part of the if statement, which tests whether B is greater than A or not. Now, I had told you earlier that Python relies on indentation, which is this white space at the beginning of a line. And this is used to define the scope in a code. Now, a lot of other programming languages often use curly brackets for this, but Python uses white spaces. We also have an elif condition, which is basically Python's way of saying that if the previous conditions were not true, then try the other condition. So if I say A is equal to 66 and B is also equal to 66, if B is greater than A, then I want to print that B is greater than A. Elif A is equal to B, remember it would be a double equality sign, then I want to print that A and B are equal. So we get the result as A and B are equal. We of course have an else condition. So if A is equal to 500 and B is equal to 66, if B is greater than A, then my result is that let's say B is greater. Elif A is equal to B, then my result is that A and B are equal. Okay, else with a colon, we can say print A is greater. So when I run the code, because A is greater, it is not meeting either the first or the second condition, and the third condition is being met. It is also possible to have an else without the elif. For example, let me just copy and paste this, and let me remove the elif completely, right? And it will still work. So if B is greater, we get B is greater. If A is greater, we get A is greater. You can also do a shorthand if, which basically says that if you have only one statement to execute, then you can put it on the same line. For example, if A is greater than B with a colon, we will say print A is greater. And I'll just copy the numbers here. Right? So you notice in a single line, we can get the result. Similarly, you also have a shorthand else if. So here I'll keep A a little smaller. So let's call this 44. And we say that print A is greater if A is greater than B, else print B is greater. You can even write a one-line if-else with three conditions. So let's say A is equal to 300, B is equal to 300, and then we want to say print A if A is greater than B, else print equal to if A is equal to B, else print B. So the result comes as an equal to sign because A is equal to B, and if the numbers were changed, then the result would change accordingly. We can also use logical operators to combine conditional statements. So we will use the AND operator right now. So A is 200, B is 66, and then C is 1000. And we say that if A is greater than B and C is greater than A, then the result is print both conditions are true. Then we also have an OR. So we can just copy this. And with the same numbers, we will say that if A is greater than B or A is greater than C, like this, then we say that at least one condition is true. Okay, let me just check. Okay, we need to replace this with an OR, and we get the result as at least one condition is true. We can also have a nested if. So let's say that x is equal to 141, and if x is greater than 100, then we want to print above 100, and then we say that if x is greater than 120, then we want to print and also above 120, else we say that print but not above 120, right? Let me just add a space here, and when we run the result, it says above 100. Okay, let me just check. What have we done incorrectly? Everything seems okay. So let me just verify. So x is 141. If x is greater than 10, or rather greater than 100, we get print above 100. And then we have if x is greater than 120, then we have print and also above 120, else this. We don't seem to be getting the right result. Okay, I'm so sorry. I put a colon here. Right, so we get the result like this, right? And if the value was not greater than 120, let's say it was 111, then the result would have been above 100, but not above 120. Now, if statements cannot be empty. So if you have some reason where you want to have an if statement with no content, you will have to put the pass statement. Now, this is very important because it helps you avoid an error. For example, if I say A is 33 and B is 400, and we say if B is greater than A, then I can pass. So if you notice, despite the fact that there was no result, it did not give me an error. If I did not put the pass, then it will give me an error saying that we have written the condition, but we have not written a result below this. Pass is also used as a placeholder. So sometimes when you don't know the result yet, but you want to keep a placeholder, you can use the pass.